Hi, I'm Wendy. Welcome to my West Coast garden. Today we're going to talk about how to prune a tomato. I've got a couple of tomatoes that have been growing in my greenhouse kind of out of control. They're part of the group of tomatoes that I didn't sort of account for the space for. So I've got them in pots that are probably too small for them. They're kind of going crazy. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to prune them up and I'm going to stake them, and then I'm going to take them and give them to my sister. So there are a few different ways that you can stake tomatoes. There is a weave method where you take the tomatoes and you kind of set a string at either end of the row and kind of weave some string a couple of places in front and in back, so they're kind of all held together. And that works well when they're in the ground. You can use tomato cages. When they're in pots, I find that using some kind of a stake, this is just a piece of bamboo. You might have some in your yard or you can buy it at the garden store. And I just stick it into the pot. You can also use, if you've got indeterminate tomatoes, there's also a string system where you sort of secure them to a string that's going up, and it lets them continue to grow and produce, and you can keep staking them as time goes along. But for these ones, it makes sense to just use a stake. They are probably pretty root bound at this point. As I say, these tomatoes are ones that I had too many seedlings and I can never stand to throw seedlings out, so I've put these into pots, but they're starting to get pretty root bound. They're producing fruit. They really need to go in the ground. I don't even know how well they'll do going into the ground. I should have attended to this quite some time ago, but they're at a good space for me to show you how I like to prune. So using just a small stake, and then there are a few different ways you can secure things to the stake. Here I've got some Velcro tape, which you can cut a little piece and stake that up. I don't usually use Velcro tape for annuals. I save it for my perennials that are going to need staking on an ongoing basis. You can also use, this is just a twist tie twine that you can use, and you can just tear off a piece. Tomatoes bruise pretty easily, so I don't like to use that. Some people use old socks or cloth that they tie onto their tomatoes. That works well. I'm going to use this plasticized tape, which it's a little bit stretchy. You can tie it loosely. You can just tear it off, so you don't need to remember to have a pair of scissors handy. And so what I do is I put the stake in the ground, I tie off with the tape securing the tomato to the stake, and I prune as I go along. So we'll take the first tomato, and for this first one I'll just put a stake into the pot, being conscious of the fact that there are roots. This plant is probably pretty root bound at this stage given the small size of the pot. So pretty small plant, or pretty small pot. I'll just push that down to the bottom. Yeah, I can hear it going through the root. And if I can just prop it up here. And you can see it's quite a bit too tall for the little tiny pot that it's in. So the stake is in there and it's secure. So the way I prune is that I want to have one main stem, which I will secure up the stake, and then I want to get rid of all of the little suckers that are between the main stem and the principal branches. I also want to get rid of all of the lower branches that are going to potentially spread disease from splash up when we water. So the first thing I need to do is secure the tomato to the stake so that it doesn't sort of fall over when I start pulling at it. So we'll just go in the middle of the tomato and tie a pretty loose knot, just so it's not going to fall over on me. And then if I look at the first joint right here, you can see that there's the main stem going out, the main stem going up, and then there's just a little sucker in the middle, which I'll just pull off, and I'll do that continuing up the stem. So again, you've got the main stem, you've got the main branch coming out, and this little guy in between will just pull out. And there's another one. Just pinch it out. Secure it kind of where it's bending there. And again, now that it's secured, you can see here's the main branch, and here's the sucker, and here's the stem coming, and here's the stem coming out, and there's the sucker. So we'll just pull that out of there. There's another sucker here. There's another here that kind of forms a V, so there's tomatoes on this branch, and I could pull this one out, and I will just for demonstration purposes because I really only like to have one stem. It is a cherry tomato, so really probably that one would have been okay to keep and tomatoes would have grown on that. But you want to prune your tomatoes partly for circulation, so that, you know, if you've got a whole bunch together in a greenhouse or on your porch or wherever, the blight doesn't have a hospitable climate to breed in, so trying to keep them free of leaves that are not necessary. I mean, they need the leaves to draw chlorophyll, but they don't need tons and tons of leaves, and you want really at this point the plant to be focusing on setting fruit. And I will also remove at the bottom here just any leaves that could potentially contact the soil. You can really remove any leaves that are below the first flower stem, so there's no harm in me leaving that sort of gap there between the first leaf and the soil. So there we go. We have one tomato plant ready to bring my sister with a few little tomatoes on it that she can put in her garden. So good luck with pruning and growing your tomatoes this season.